Real apps have keyboard shortcuts. You might think that it's just heavy-duty professional apps that need keyboard shortcuts. But even some apps that are just for consumption have found value in keyboard shortcuts. What we'll be doing in this video is taking this game I'm making and adding keyboard shortcuts to it. The functionality is already there. We're just adding another way for the user to interact with it. First, we'll do basic one-key shortcuts. Then, we'll learn how to autofocus. Then, we'll do combination keyboard shortcuts. And then, we'll put it all together in a couple cases of ever-increasing complexity. By the way, a quick intro. I'm Jeffrey, and on this channel, I show you how to build cool stuff on the web, mostly with front-end JavaScript. If that sounds good to you, click the subscribe button. And if you want me to solve your problem directly, go ahead and go to the consulting page on my website. And now, let's get coding. The first problem we're going to be solving is this dialog screen. So we've got these arrow buttons here that they work. We can go forward and backward. And it's technically correct, but it's not a very good user experience. We want to be able to have the user click the forward arrow on their keyboard, or enter or spacebar, and move the dialog forward like that. So we need to be able to listen for these key down events, and we could put this code in directly, something like this. However, we're using Vue, and there's a great Vue ecosystem that takes a lot of these things and makes them easier. So we're going to be using the Vue use library today. And as you can see, it takes the key down and makes it a lot easier to use. Very, very simple. So the great thing about tools like this is that they simplify each action. So for the same amount of thought, we can get something more complex and more useful to our users done, instead of dealing with small little annoying things like browser compatibilities or weird APIs. So let's take a look at our current dialog screen. So here we have the left arrow and the right arrow. And we've already got the functionality built in, where if you click them, it calls the go forward function. And we've got this here so that if it's blocked, if it's disabled, then it doesn't work. And so what we want to do is we want to use these functions, these two, and attach them to the keyboard shortcuts. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import onKeystroke from Vue use. And then we're going to use onKeystroke. So we're going to put in the enter key. And then we're going to just put in our go forward button. You can define a function like this as an anonymous function. Or you could do like we're doing now and just put in a previously named function. So let's go ahead and test this out. And now, whenever I hit the enter key, then it goes forward. So that's working great, but we want to have the down key and right key and the spacebar working as well. So we can feed in an array. So we'll put a space for the space, and then arrow down and arrow right. And you may be wondering, where do we get these? Because you probably don't think, oh, arrow down, with that particular phrasing and capitalization immediately. And so how we get that, there is a list here. This list, so we can just search for, okay, space. So here we've got the empty space as the space key, and we've got tab, enter, and you can look up all of the other stuff that you may be interested in as well. So let's go ahead and do this for the arrow up and arrow left as well. And when either of those are pressed, we will call the go backward function. And let's test this out. All right, so all of these are working perfectly. This brings up an important point. So keyboard shortcuts are not just for power users. they are really useful for power users who want to navigate your site quickly. But regular users also have some expectations, such as if you press the forward button, you'll go forward. And we want to cater to as many of those expectations as we can. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and tackle our puzzle screen. So our goal here is that someone will type in an SQL command, and then it will run that SQL command and test it against what it expects to get back. And then, if it's the correct command, then they'll be able to get it right. So it's like acting like a little puzzle. This is a very simple puzzle right now because it's the first one, but that's the goal here. And so what we want to do is make this so easy to interact with that people's hands never have to leave their keyboard and they never really have to think about the interface. We want it to be natural. The first thing we'll want to do is make it so that whenever you start typing, it'll automatically focus this input box. And so luckily VueUse has something really handy called onStartTyping. So no matter where you are, it'll automatically focus on a specific input once you start typing. So before we implement this, let's take a quick look at our code. So we've got a form with a text area and a button that switches between run query and next section, depending on whether it's correct. And all the logic is basically fed in via the props. We don't have to worry about that. What we need to worry about now is when we start typing and this text area is on the screen, we want the focus to go there automatically. So first, we need to get a reference. Let's go ahead and call it query input. Then we need to define that ref down here. So we'll have const query input equals ref, and we don't need to feed anything there. We can just say null. And you need to make sure that you do have ref imported from Vue. We already had that imported. Next, we'll want to import stuff from VueUse core, and we'll be importing the onStartTyping. And then we can start to use this. So onStartTyping, so the anonymous function we put in here is going to run every time we start typing and this component is on the screen. And so in this, we're going to want to focus on that query input. So query input.value.focus. And the value is needed because it's a Vue ref. And let's see how this works. So here's my mouse. You'll see me clicking, so we are clearly not in the box. And there we go. And I'm going to click outside the box again, and it still works. Excellent. And how this works specifically is we've got the query input. That's the Vue reference value. And then when we call .value on it, that's going to give us this text area. And then we can call .focus on that text area. The next thing we'll want to be able to do is run the query from the keyboard. And so we'll be doing the Control plus Enter keyboard shortcut, which is really common in a lot of apps where you have typing and you have keyboard shortcuts. So there are two VueUse utilities that are really useful for this. So one is useKeyModifier. And here we can see when the modifiers are pressed. And the great thing about this is it does have a handy list of modifiers right here. However, there's another called useMagicKeys, which does everything that the modifier utility does, and a lot more. So there are a lot of ways to use this, the two that we'll be looking at today. So we can call the useMagicKeys utility and get various keys, but you can also get combinations. And so you can get the combinations with a plus or with an underscore. And so we're going to do Control plus Enter using this method. So we'll start by importing useMagicKeys, and then we will go ahead and we will destructure useMagicKeys, and we will get Control Enter, and it will automatically know to destructure into this with the underscore. Separately, these would be Control and Enter, like that. And we'll be showing how to use that in a second. But let's start off with just Control underscore Enter. Now we'll want to watch when Control Enter is being pressed, and we can use Watch from View, or we can use the even shorter Whenever from View Use. And so now, whenever Control Enter is pressed, then we're going to run this function. And so for now, we'll just do console.log it's pressed, and we'll show that working. So first we're going to press Control on its own, nothing. Then Enter on its own, nothing. And then both together, and there we go. And now let's actually put in our submit query. And so we can just feed in this right here. Easy. So let's go ahead and take a look at this working. Good, so I'm not having to move my hands from the keyboard in order to do this. This is great. However, there are some issues that come up based on user expectations. Let's go ahead and handle those. The first is that they don't really know that this keyboard shortcut is there. And so we can put Control plus Enter here in the button so that they'll be able to see it. Second, a lot of people have muscle memory of different things than Control. So personally, I like the Command or Meta key. And so I always push that by default. And it's going to take me a little while to realize I'm not actually pushing Control, I'm pushing something else. So what we can do is we can start adding Meta Enter and Alt Enter, and we can feed these to the whenever. So now I can hit Meta or Command Enter and Alt or Option Enter, and it works. So basically all the modifier keys are going to work. The next thing is to make it so once you have the correct answer, then hitting Command Enter again will take you to the next section instead of having to go and click. So we could define for this another function, or we could do an anonymous function here. And what it'll do is it'll check if props.is correct. Then it will go ahead and call go to next section, which is what the next section button already does. And we'll put Control plus Enter here as well. And you'll see we have if is correct, it'll show this. So this matches the logic. So we'll props.go to next section, and we don't need to feed it any arguments. And otherwise, we're going to call submit query. And we can go ahead and test this out. So we will type in the correct answer. And there we go, it went forward. But something that you might have noticed is that it did go forward really quickly. Yeah, so I did not press the Enter key a second time there. What's happening? What's happening is that the whenever function is going to fire whenever these combinations are held down. And so if you press the Enter key and you're still holding it down, and then even just for a split second, and then is correct becomes true, you're going to go to the next section. And so this is one of the downsides of using whenever. And so how can we get around this? The way to do it is to stop using whenever and bring back onKeystroke and use that in conjunction with useMagicKeys. And so what we'll do is we'll replace these combinations with just plain Control, Alt, and Meta. And then instead of doing whenever, we'll do onKeystroke, and we will have enter. It's actually just going to be enter, so we do not need the array. And then whenever we hit enter, we are going to call this anonymous function, and we're eventually going to call this, but first we need to check whether any of these are held down. So we'll have a const of modifier pressed, and we'll need to get the value from there, or the value from there, or the value from there. So if any of those are true, modifier pressed is going to be true. And so if modifier pressed, then we'll just copy and paste this logic. And then we can get rid of the whenever. And so this will trigger this function whenever we hit the enter key. And then before it does anything, we're going to check whether the modifiers are pressed. So let's test it first. Good, so that's working for the first one. And now let's check to make sure that it does not go to the next one automatically. Good, so it's staying there for a while, but when I hit it again, it goes to the next screen. And now we've made it so you can navigate the through line of the app using just the keyboard. However, there are a couple more things we can do to make this a little bit nicer. So we're going to do those and review a lot of the concepts we've already used and add a couple more things that should give you the tools, once we're done, to tackle 90% of the situations you'll encounter. The first place we'll do it is in the sidebar. So here we can click to go to different panes in the sidebar, but it would be nice to be able to do this with the keyboard. So let's go to our code. And so here in the sidebar, then we can see that we're looping through the tabs, and when we click, then we set the selected tab. And so we're going to want to do this with our keyboard shortcuts. So first we're going to import from view use core, and we're going to import onKeystroke. And we know that we're going to be doing useMagicKeys for the modifier keys as well. And then on keystroke, we're going to be doing, let's say, so we have progress, dialog, and commands. So let's do P, C, and D. And so those are the ones that this will happen on. And here we'll need to bring in the event. And then using e.key, we can check whether it's equal to P, C, or D. And so we'll go ahead and do that right now. So if key is equal to P, then we're going to set the selected tab's value, have to do .value because it's a ref, to progress. Then we'll go ahead and do that for the other two as well. And now it works, but we'll see that it is typing out what we have here. So what we're going to want to do is add the modifier keys. So we'll be able to do the same pattern that we were using before. So we'll get all the modifier keys and then get a modifier pressed from them. And then if modifier pressed, then we do all of this. And then that should work. And indeed, it does work. But you'll see if we use some of the other modifier keys, then it does stuff like try to print things. And that is not what we want. So we want to prevent the default. And we'll go ahead and do that here after the modifier pressed. If we do it before, then we may be preventing more than we want. But if the modifier is pressed and they hit one of these keystrokes, now it's only going to be doing this. So only the thing that we're specifying in here. And now we can see that it's working as intended. For the final one, I'm just going to show you the finished product. So here, you've got these tabs, and you can hit Command and 1 or 2 to switch between them, or any modifier key. And if we had more, we'd be able to switch between those as well. And here's how we do it in the code. So we're going to use the useMagicKeys to get the modifier keys, and then do the modifier pressed pattern that we've been using this whole time. And then we're going to prevent default, because for these, if you don't do that, it's going to change tabs on your browser and not just on the tables. And the next part of this to understand is the key codes. So here we're hard coding 1 through 9. And this has to be strings. It cannot be the actual integers. And we put them in here. And then if the key is equal to 1, then we're going to set it to the query tab. Otherwise, we're going to turn it into a number and then subtract 2 and find that as the index of our tables. And so we're doing this, we subtract 1 because it's 0 indexed, and then we subtract another 1 because the query is the first one. Anyway, so then if we get a table, we set the selected tab. And now we have everything we need in order to navigate this without ever touching the keyboard. So let's go ahead and take a quick review of what got us here. So in our dialog screen, we have the simplest case of just using onKeystroke with certain keys, and then we run a function. Then we had a slightly more complex case where we wanted to see whether a modifier was pressed before we took an action. And then within there, we took the state of the app and chose which action to do. Then on the sidebar, we took all of that. We decided, okay, for these 3, we're going to see first if the modifier is pressed, then we're going to prevent the default, and then take an action based on which one was pressed. And then finally, for the tabs, we do something very similar, but with even more specific code for each option. And of course, we also have the onStartTyping function, which makes it so we always focus on the query input whenever we start typing. And that is all you'll need for about 90% of the use cases for keyboard shortcuts. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like and subscribe down below. If there's another topic you want to hear about, go ahead and leave a comment. I'll respond to all comments made within the first 24 hours. And finally, if you want me to solve your problem for you, then go ahead and visit the consulting page on my website. And as always, work hard, work smart, and have fun.